So now that we've explored PowerShell, or not PowerShell, Active Directory a little bit, and we've seen the default settings, the default users, and the default groups in Active Directory, and how we can discover those through PowerShell, what about creating our own? Well, the commandlet that we use to create our own is new AD user. So I'm going to do a get help on new, not net, new AD user. And I'm going to go ahead and pipe this to more. Alright, so this will create a new Active Directory user. And as you can see here, we have a lot of options for creating a new Active Directory user. Now, we don't need to use all of them. There's actually only a handful of things that we need. Really, you need a name. But if you create a user with just a name, no password, it'll automatically be disabled. Typically, you're going to want, and that name is going to be the account name, so typically you're going to want a display name, a given name, surname, or first and last name. Frequently, when you create one, you'll want to give it a default password and tell the system that they have to change password at next logon. So there are a handful of things like that that we'll need. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff we can add if we want to. But we don't necessarily have to. So let's talk about doing this manually. Now, the new AD user, you can use it in multiple ways, right? So you can use it at command prompt and just one-off a user. Make one just off one-off thing. You can create a script to automate the process a little bit, and that can help if you're going to do it a lot, because you may want specific things. I mean, you may want to be prompted about specific things you need to remember to add in. So that can be useful. The other thing you can do is you can import information from a CSV file and pipe it to the AD user and have the AD user create a whole bunch of users all at one time. Now, for that to work, you have to have a good CSV file. You have to have things laid out correctly. But that can be managed. Typically, what will happen is you'll get a CSV file from human resources, and then you'll clean it up and get it ready for your script, and then you'll run your script against that CSV file. Now, we're not going to deal with that today. We are going to deal with that a little bit later on in another video. So let's start by walking through the new AD user account. But there is one thing that we have to deal with right away. And you see this right here. This takes a string data. So the name is going to be a string or just text. But the account password has to be a secure string. So if you give it a plain text password, it's not going to take it. So there's a little bit of gymnastics that we're going to have to jump through here in order to make this work. And it's not horrible. Let me show you what it looks like. We're going to use a tool called Convert to Secure String. We're going to use it if I can spell it right. Secure string. And what that'll do is that'll take something and it will convert it to a secure string. Now, there's a couple of things that we need here. We're going to need to give it the string data that we want to use. So we're going to give it a default password, or it's going to become a default password. If we try to do just that, it's going to complain and say that's not a valid encrypted string. Well, you're right, it's not. I want you to create it to one. So what we'll do is we'll add in another option called as plain text. And what that says is this plain text, convert it to a secure string? Well, it's still going to complain. It says it cannot process plain text input. But it does tell you how to fix this. To suppress this warning and actually do your job, convert the plain text to a secure string, reissue the command with the force parameter. So this is what we actually need. Convert to secure string, and then the password, and then as plain text, and then force, and that will do it. But what that does is that creates a system secure string, but we actually can't work with it at the moment. It just creates an object. So what we have to do is we have to capture this somehow. And there's two ways we can do this. So we can capture this in a variable and then use that variable in our new user commandlet, or in our new user commandlet we can put this entire command in parentheses. We're going to capture it as a variable. So I'm going to hit my up arrow and I'm just going to capture this as $pass equals. And now that's stored my password in $pass. Okay, now that I have that done, I can create my new AD user. So it's going to be new AD user, and I'm going to give it the name, and this is going to be my login name. D. Dalton will be my login name. I want to set the password, so that's going to be account password is $pass. Now, alternatively, I could have done account password and then in parentheses and put this entire command line, close parentheses, and then go on and do my other options as well. I like this a little bit better because I think it's a little bit cleaner. Now, I want to force them to change password at next logon. So I'm going to set change password at logon, and this is going to take a Boolean value, so it's going to be either true or false. But because it's a Boolean value, we need to use the hard-coded variables, or the default variable of $true, and that's going to force a login or a change password at next login. Now the rest of this is going to kind of be window dressing. I want to set the display name to David Dalton, and notice I put that in quotation marks. If I don't, what's going to happen is it's going to see display name, and it's only going to take that first block of text David, and then it's going to think Dalton is another parameter. So by putting it in quotes, I can get it David space Dalton, and that will work just fine. So then I'm going to set a given name, which is another word for first name, which is going to be David. And this I don't have to do the single quotes because it's only one word. There's no spaces. And then I'm going to set a surname of Dalton, and surname is another word for last name. So if I typed everything correctly, that should create a new user for me. And I can confirm that by typing get AD user, and then I'm just going to use my D Dalton as my username, and here it is. My distinguished name, common name D. Dalton, inside users, inside example, inside the container users, inside the domain of example, inside the domain of local. Enabled, false, given name, the account name, the SAM account name, the SID, and the surname. So, there we go. We have now created our first user. Now, it says that it is disabled. Okay, so how do I go about enabling that account? Well, let's start with this. Do you remember when we did the search AD account? I can do a search-AD account, and I believe the command or the option I want is account disabled. And I'm going to pipe that to format table, and I just want to see the name of my accounts that are disabled. Let's spell search correctly, shall we? There we go. D. Dalton is currently disabled. Well, I can enable that using the command enable-AD account D. Dalton. And that should enable my account. Now let me scroll back up to my get AD user. And my account is now enabled and ready to be logged in.